What Rambo taught me about living. The many adventures of John Rambo, a former soldier who just wanted to be left alone, were a large source of material my young mind was seeded with. The films had gratuitous action, which was the main attractor when I was a kid, but I now think the action was the camel that got the potent questions past my mental defenses. No kid wants to be lectured or to learn valuable life lessons. With Rambo, the action hid the lessons and let them take root. The first lesson was that you should not underestimate the quiet person. Rambo was a loner who wanted to be left alone, and when he was not left alone, a violent reaction followed. I learned later that he was a war veteran, written to have PTSD. As a young viewer, I just thought he was like me. I was a particular kind of child. From early on, I had a different perception of how to be. The other children around me were more like children than I was. They were energetic and loud, as children should be, but they were also sensitive to small differences. I was easy for them to detect. And when they decided to test the difference they perceived, they would form into something like an octopus, a single organism with tentacles searching the surface of me for a crack to enter. They also had a chant that preceded the appearance of the octopus, the moment when the separate children became one thing. This taught me to be alert to the coming appearance of an octopus. My nature made me somewhat removed from others, and I did not begrudge the separation. The people around me, children and adults both, seemed to live on a thin layer, never venturing too deep, for fear of cracking the layer they stood on. I went deeper. But the real reason for keeping my distance was not what I would have said at the time. I was afraid of the violence I might do back. It had only happened once before, but once was enough. It had been seamless and instantaneous, somehow spectacular. I had not had to think. I had not been trained. The target was devastated, more by surprise than by force, I think. I was surprised too. The thing in me felt too pure and powerful for everyday use, though. I felt I had to hide it. I was a child, so I do not have the words for it. I had impressions. After that one event, I noticed more and more the thing the violence had stemmed from. It felt like a dense, flowing intensity. I could feel it whenever it stirred. That is why I watched Rambo with recognition rather than awe. The quiet veteran with something dangerous inside him was not something I needed convincing about. I had one inside me too. It used different weapons, but it was the same kind of thing. I don't know if I'm fooling myself with claims of childhood powers of recognition. I might be changing something in the remembering. But there was another case of recognition that comes to mind. My aunts and uncles, who I loved, were in constant, mild conflict with each other. Anything could set them off, and the conflicts were huge explosions of verbal violence. Disproportionate to the input, I thought. After watching this a few times, I set my mind to figure out why. I searched my observations and concluded that they were carrying an old grievance they had never let go of. A grievance with a common origin? The interesting part was that I could not know what the grievance had been, only that it had been from a pre-adult stage and from the childhood home, since that was the only place where the necessary conditions would have occurred. I had a capacity as a child to recognize a thing by the void it left, to infer the shape of something hidden by the consequences it produced. That capacity was the same one that read Rambo, It read the trauma underneath the violence without needing the films to show me the war scenes. I say written to have PTSD because Rambo seems to stumble into violent conflicts very efficiently and to find himself in places where weapons are conveniently at hand, which I suspected he was doing on purpose. But I was a kid, and it was an action movie. The line of logic only stretches so far. The things the films were saying underneath all the action, I came to believe, was that Rambo himself was the weapon. The bow and the gun and the knife were extensions of him. Here is how I think it influenced me as an adult. I am more patient in interactions with other people now. I can feel a Rambo inside me, and I know I do not want to let him out raw. Carl Jung called this kind of relationship with one's own capacity for harm integrating the shadow. The name fits. The shape it takes in my actual life is something like this. Sometimes I will be in a meeting or family conversation or long phone call, and someone will start using too many words. The words are forceful, the volume is high, and the effect is named to overwhelm. I've come to recognize the pattern as it begins. I, or sometimes the others with me, will absorb the assault for a few minutes. The minutes feel longer than they are. This is the part that matches the early scenes of First Blood, where Rambo stays silent and tries to avoid the confrontation that the deputies keep escalating towards him. After enduring the volume for those minutes, I will have a destructive response ready inside me. Not a sentence exactly, more like a custom-made explosive arrowhead assembled from the speaker's own words and their previous behavior and the parts of their personality they have been unwise enough to display. All I have to do is draw the bow and release. The target would not stand a chance. I have never released the arrow. I select the bowstring and let the arrow stay where it is. In several of those cases, I noticed afterward that the person self-selected for removal in some other way. In others, someone else loosed the arrow on them eventually, which was not surprising, because anyone who uses a large volume of words to overwhelm others tends to fall back on the same weapon often enough that someone will return it to them in kind. I was relieved each time that the arrow had not come from me. The arrow affects both people, not only the target. The same dense, flowing intensity that wants to harm can also be aimed at something that takes years to finish. There is a degree I once flamed out of as a younger man, and years later, when I needed it to qualify for the kind of work I wanted to do, I aimed the intensity at that instead. I let the same force that had wanted to destroy a man pull me through a silence and exams for years. The shadow is morally neutral. The same arrow can be aimed at the person or degree. The man inside has to be acknowledged. Then he has to be integrated, which is not the same as suppressed. Jung's shadow is not a prisoner to be locked away. He is a force to be assimilated, given proper channels, and aimed at the things in life that deserve the intensity he brings. Mine goes into the gym, into long hours at the desk, into the willingness to say the hard truth thing when the room would rather hear the easy false one. The violence does not disappear. It becomes mine to use. The bow and the arrow and the man are the same thing now.